Paul Blackburn was scratched from his start. Tylor Megill stepped up. The Mets won. The Braves lost. It was a productive day in this NL pennant race. Talk about all the latest for your Mets on today's show.
You are Locked On Mets, your daily New York Mets podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello to all you amazing Mets fans. You're watching Locked On Mets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I'm your host, Ryan Finkelstein. If you want to find any of my work, follow me on X at FinkelsteinRyan. You can also find some of my writing at justbaseball.com, where I work as the managing editor. Now through September 22nd, all FanDuel customers can bet $5 and get a 3-week free trial of NFL Sunday Ticket from YouTube and YouTube TV. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. Well, Monday was one of those games for the New York Mets where they had to win ugly. And in doing so, I really got some more confidence that this Mets team is going to find their way to get the job done here in this playoff race. Because this was a game where the offense really struggled. You did have a bad inning from your bullpen, and yet you overcame all of it and found a way to win. Also, dealt with some adversity before first pitch. Paul Blackburn was scratched from the start due to lower back stiffness. So who's got to make that start for the Mets? It's Tylor Megill. And we have seen Tylor Megill is a very inconsistent starting pitcher this season. But there is always that potential that he can lock in and have a great start. And he did that. And you know what? It made me almost want to see Tylor Megill get another start. Because Tylor Megill at his absolute best looks dominant. Because he's 6'7", he can live in the mid-90s, and when he's rolling, it can be a thing to behold. In this game, you had one bad inning, and that was the first inning. Gets the first two batters out, gives up a walk, then a double to put two runners in scoring position. He then walks the bases loaded. There's then a hard hit ball right at him that he fields cleanly, flips it to Pete Alonso. From that point on, Tylor Megill is perfect. The second through the sixth inning, it was retiring the side in order each time. And of the 16 batters in a row that he got out, he struck out 8 of them. And really, it was those final 5 innings, 8 strikeouts to get those last 15 outs on the day, 9 strikeouts overall. Just a great start for Megill. And what we saw in this one, what Carlos Mendoza credited to him after the game as far as why it was successful, it was the two-seam fastball. That's something that he has picked up mid-season here to get another variation of his fastball. This is a guy who, when he debuted back in 2021, he was almost fastball only. He was getting by in the minor leagues by blowing people away because he gets great extension. Again, he's 6'7". His extension is 7'4". That's among some of the best in all of baseball. So he shortens that distance to home plate with how long he is. And when you're throwing in the mid to upper 90s, you can really have a fastball that jumps on hitters. But this is the big leagues. It's not the minor leagues. Guys can catch up to that pitch. And what we've seen from Megill throughout his career is when he, for one, loses his command, that's when he gets in trouble. But two, if guys can really start to key in on that four-seam fastball, he can still get hit hard. Now the two-seam adds another wrinkle to his arsenal, just like the split does as well. And these are all pitches that are fastballs. He throws them the same way as his fastball. It's just about altering the grip. I think that is a really good sign of Megill finding out who he should be as a pitcher. So this was a really solid outing because now with that sinker in play with the two-seam, he's able to get more balls on the ground, maybe pitch deeper into games, and attack the zone. And the funny thing was, even as a guy that now all of a sudden was really going to that sinker a lot, he was still racking up the strikeouts as well. He struck out the side in the 5th inning. So it was a great start by Tylor Megill. Not a good start, a great start. And that kept the team in the game because the offense is really going through it. Another bullpen game, and I almost think at times these bullpen games that they're facing are more difficult than just getting a starting pitcher, even if it's a really good starting pitcher. But you can at least, as a team there, strategize. You know who you're going to face. You have no idea what the game plan is when you're going into these bullpen games for the other team. And the bulk guy was Ryan Yarborough, and the Mets just could not get anything going. They scored a run in the 4th inning as Pete Alonso drew a 2-out walk. Jose Iglesias got hit by a pitch, and JD Martinez came through with the 2-out hit. So that gave the Mets their first run. Other than that, they gave Megill no support through those 6 innings. And once the Blue Jays got into the bullpen, the Mets had a little bit of trouble in that 7th. Danny Young comes on to face some lefties, gets the first batter out, then facing Davis Schneider, he throws that back foot slider that hits the back foot. We've seen that a ton with Danny Young. Puts a runner on. Alejandro Kirk gets a base hit. So all of a sudden you have 2 runners on and 1 out. Carlos Mendoza goes to Jose Budo to try to pitch out of that jam. And we'll talk about this more in the final segment. I don't know if Budo is the guy to get you out of jams right now because he's all of a sudden struggling with his control a little bit. Gives up a base hit that loads the bases. Then he hits a batter to force in a run, gives up a sacrifice fly to force in another. Those are both the inherited runs. So nothing charged to Budo, but 2 runs charged to Danny Young. The Mets lose their lead. He strikes out George Springer to avoid further damage and gets out of the inning without it being a really bad one. But all of a sudden, the Mets are trailing by a score of 2-1. And the way the lineup looked all game, we had very little confidence that they were going to be able to find a way to win. But luckily, the Mets were able to rally in the top of the 8th inning. Jesse Winker drew a leadoff walk. Tyrone Taylor pinch runs for him. You then have Francisco Alvarez hits a cue shot. Then the third baseman tries to run it on, make a play. Infield hit. Bad throw allows Taylor to advance to third. Francisco Lindor comes up with runners at the corners. Has a pretty solid at bat. Gets 3-0. Takes a pitch. Takes a big cut at the 3-1 pitch. And then spits on the full count pitch to draw a walk, load the bases. Eddie Alvarez comes on to pinch run for Francisco Alvarez. We'll talk about how the Mets got Eddie Alvarez a little bit in the next segment, but this is another underrated pickup by David Stearns in this front office, upgrading from Pablo Reyes in that pinch running utility infielder spot, and he really comes up big as the Mets score their runs on some pass balls. The first one when Mark Vientos was up with the bases loaded, and that allowed Tyrone Taylor to score. Easy read, ball that goes all the way to the backstop. Really no play on it. Vientos strikes out. Brandon Nimmo comes up. Then Eddie Alvarez scores on one that was a pass ball that got away from the catcher, but not super far. But Alvarez had a fantastic read on it. Wasn't even a play at home. That was the game-winning run for the New York Mets. So the day they trade for this guy, minor league addition, gets brought up to the big league roster, makes an immediate impact, and the Mets able to narrowly hold on. The bullpen very strong in the final 2 innings. Ryan Stanek came on and was lights out in the 8th, struck out the side, and he had to strike out Vladimir Guerrero Jr. and Spencer Horwitz, the 2 hottest hitters in that Blue Jays lineup. So that was really encouraging to see Stanek all of a sudden maybe looking like a guy the Mets can trust and leverage. Edwin Diaz came on in the 9th, and it got a little bit scary because he struck out the first batter, got a fly out, so he was sitting pretty, but then he gives up an infield hit. And then a long fly ball that goes to the warning track. But Starling Marte was there, made the catch, and the Mets were able to hold on to win the game by a score of 3-2. Just a nail biter, one where the offense did not look good. Again, there was a bullpen mishap, a bad inning where the bullpen gave up a crooked number and blew a lead. But luckily, the Mets were able to rally right back. Tylor Megill again deserves all the credit in the world for this one. And you get some good pitching on the back end from Stanek and Diaz to hold on. The Atlanta Braves lost a 1-0 game to the Reds today. It was a makeup of a rainout earlier in the season. They got 2 hit. So the Mets are back to a game lead in this wild card race. And the Padres and the Diamondbacks, both of them were off today. So they pick up a half a game on both of those teams. So now a game and a half behind the Padres, just a game behind the Diamondbacks. Remember, they have the tiebreaker on both of those teams. So if they were able tomorrow to pick up another game on the Diamondbacks, they would move into that second wild card spot. And same thing when it comes to the Padres. If they're able to eventually even things up with them, the Mets could end up with the top wild card spot. So they just got to keep on handling their own business, winning the game in front of them, and they'll be just all right. Really big one tonight, though, in a game that they very easily could have lost. In the next segment, though, what I want to do is talk about this addition of Eddie Alvarez. I think it actually might play a pretty big role in how the Mets fare over these final 3 weeks. So we'll go through that a little bit and just how this front office continues to plug holes by making sure there's never a stone unturned. So we'll go through that in just a minute. First, though, quick word from our sponsors. Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Next week is the final homestand of the season for the New York Mets. Make sure you go to the game using Game Time, the fast and easy way to buy tickets for all the sports, music, comedy, and theater events near you. And Game Time has a new feature called Game Time Picks. It makes getting tickets for your favorite live events even easier, as it'll filter out all the fluff and only show you incredible deals on great seats, so you don't have to waste your time searching through thousands of tickets. Game Time is the place to go for last-minute tickets as well. I don't buy tickets until I'm about to walk into the ballpark. I pull open the Game Time app. I use that Game Time Picks filter, and I find the best possible seat at a great value. And I just walk in, 2 taps, you're all set. You can buy tickets in a minute. It's that easy. Just download the Game Time app, create an account, use the code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account, redeem the code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off. Download Game Time today. What time is it? It's game time. Stay up to date with all the latest in the world of sports when you check out Locked On Sports Today, streaming 24/7 on YouTube. If you're watching on YouTube today, do me a favor, hit that subscribe button. Our goal is to get to 10,000 subscribers by the end of the season, so I appreciate all of you who continue to hit that red button and subscribe. All right, so let's talk about the latest addition to the New York Mets, Eddie Alvarez. The Mets make a trade in the middle of September, and this is another example of David Stearns in this front office going out there and making sure if there is an upgrade to be had, they don't wait on it. They don't just say, you know what, we'll be fine. Pablo Reyes has been with us all year. He can steal bases if we need him to. He can be that guy that can play defense all over. He's played some outfield, some infield this year. Let's just ride it out with him. It's fine. No, there's an upgrade. You can get a guy in Eddie Alvarez who has all of a sudden tapped into some power this year. 18 home runs in AAA, by far career high, 26 doubles, 811 OPS, 18 stolen bases on 25 attempts, literally played all over in AAA for the Red Sox, second, third, short, left, center, right. So he gives you that versatility. He's a left-handed bat, so he complements Jose Iglesias a little bit more. Not that I expect him to start over Iglesias in any of these games, but if there was a terrible matchup for Iglesias, here's a lefty that could come in and start at second base for you in a pinch if you need him to. And yeah, tonight, Pablo Reyes, maybe he does score on that pass ball that ends up being the game-winning run. But Eddie Alvarez got as good of a jump as you possibly could. And if Reyes got thrown out and the Mets never pulled the trigger on this trade, you'd go back and you wouldn't know that they had this opportunity. But David Stearns might. And it's that never-ending pursuit of getting better that has put the Mets in this position. They did it when they picked up Luis Torrens. Tomas Nido was having a fine season as a backup catcher. He's solid enough defensively, knows the pitching staff, guys like throwing to him, good framer. But what was he not doing? Controlling the running game. And he wasn't hitting much. Torrens was hitting in AAA, has a big arm. The Mets try him out, even though Francisco Alvarez was due to return a week or two after that. Torrens beats out Nido, and he has been a huge piece of this team. These are these underrated moves that make you just marginally better. Where instead of being an 83-win team, Torrens maybe helps you win a couple games. Now you're an 85-win team. Maybe Alvarez tonight got you that one game that was a difference. He might not do anything else. But if it was Alvarez's base running tonight that won you that extra game, that could be the difference at the end of the season. So all of these little things add up, and this front office deserves a ton of credit for continuously making these moves. I also should mention, if the name Eddie Alvarez sounds familiar, this was the speed skater. Okay, so he's the one that made the debut for the Marlins back in 2020, won a silver medal in the 2014 Winter Olympics in Sochi. So there is a little bit of notoriety to his name because of that. But a guy that's been grinding it out as a kind of career minor leaguer here for some time now, that's having his best season. And the Mets grab him, and he seems like he's going to fit in like a glove. Guy that is from Miami, works out in the area, so he knows a lot of the Mets that also live in the South Florida area. JD Martinez, Mark Vientos, said Jose Quintana were some of the names that he dropped. He said he's built for this type of a role. He knows how to lay down a bunt, get a runner over, hit and run, steal bases, play all over. So I think he's really going to be another nice addition for this club down the stretch. He can't be part of your playoff roster. That's the one sort of knock you can have on this move. Now, Pablo Reyes wasn't going to be eligible either, but he was in the organization prior to September 1st. And as I talked about with Shintaro Fujinami a couple days ago on this show, if the guy's in your organization prior to September, you can petition the commissioner's office and they can replace an injured player that served their full designation. So for Fujinami, they could add him to the roster if they wanted to replace Brooks Raley because he has been on the IL for 60 days and he's not going to be eligible to come back at any point this season. So the Mets can make that move to the commissioner's office, basically deem Raley ineligible, and Fujinami could come up. Same thing with Pablo Reyes, I believe, if I am reading the rule correctly. If they wanted to, they could have said, all right, if Jeff McNeil had served 11 days, why did I get 11 days? If Jeff McNeil had served 10 days on the IL, which he will by the time he gets to the end of the season, I think they could have plugged Pablo Reyes into a roster spot by petitioning to the commissioner's office. But again, Alvarez might be better for these final 3 weeks, and you got to get in. So for those of you who are still upset and you want to see Luis Angel Acuna, I will say this opens the door to that a little bit more because Jeff McNeil probably not available for that wild card series at least, and likely not the NLDS if the Mets are fortunate enough to get that far. So if you want a speedster on your playoff roster, it can't be Eddie Alvarez, and now it can't be Pablo Reyes. So maybe it is Luis Angel Acuna added to the roster at the very end of this season. He's on the 40, so he'd be eligible to play in the postseason. And you look at a team that probably isn't going to carry DJ Stewart into October. Maybe there still is a world where we see Acuna and he makes his MLB debut as a pinch runner in the playoffs. You never know. But for right now, the Mets saw an opportunity to get a little bit better, and they took it. So Eddie Alvarez is part of this team down the stretch. Only going to be, at this point, 18 more games, but he could provide a lift in those games. So I like this addition a lot. I definitely think he's a more valuable piece than Pablo Reyes was. Again, complements Iglesias better as a left-handed hitter. I think more versatility when it comes to what he's done this season. He really was playing all over in AAA, so that does give the Mets a really nice piece that can fill a hole whenever you find one. And then again, I think we saw the athleticism tonight, able to score that run. That base running is going to be a big part of how he is used down the stretch. Now, to close the show today, though, we still have an injury to discuss, and there's Paul Blackburn, who was scratched from this start. I want to talk about that. I also want to talk about the bullpen. I think roles might need to evolve at this stage of the season. I want to explain why in just a minute. First, though, another quick word from our sponsors. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. You've heard us talk a lot about FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Well, we have something a little bit different for you. Now through September 22nd, all FanDuel customers can bet $5 and get a 3-week free trial of NFL Sunday Ticket from YouTube and YouTube TV. Then with the YouTube TV base plan, you'll be able to watch every regular season Sunday afternoon at a market game. And again, this is for all FanDuel customers, not just new customers. Again, you bet $5, you get a 3-week free trial of NFL Sunday Ticket from YouTube and YouTube TV. All you need is a Google account and a current form of payment, and you can cancel anytime. So just visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to download America's #1 sportsbook. If you're an everyday listener to the show, make sure you become a Locked On Mets insider. This is our texting service where you get updates from me anytime news breaks in the Mets. You can ask me questions anytime. You can also take part in our Locked On Mets signed photo giveaways and you get the lineup graphics sent to your phone each day so you know who's in the starting lineup without ever having to go on social media. If you want to be a Locked On Mets insider, find the link in the episode description. Go to subtext.com/LockedOnMets. And we were all surprised today when we got the news that Paul Blackburn would not be making the start and Tylor Megill would. Blackburn apparently had a lower back issue that he complained about the next day after his start in AAA. Didn't think it was serious, thought it was just something they could manage. But when he went out to run on Sunday, trying to get prepared for his start today, he was unable to run. His back just completely locked up on him. So the Mets obviously had to scratch him. The current plan right now is to just give him obviously some treatment. And the hope is he can still pitch on this road trip. So maybe he gets a start in Philadelphia. Maybe he's available to pitch out of the bullpen. But if he's not available, he's on the IL still, and Tylor Megill slides into that spot in the rotation from this point on. And look, Megill looked great tonight. So I don't think this is a loss that cripples the Mets necessarily. Would I prefer Blackburn to make those starts over Megill, which is probably at this point maybe 2 more turns? In some ways, yes, just because there's that uncertainty with Megill. Remember, at one point this season, he shut out the Dodgers for 7 innings, and then he faltered. So as great as Megill looked tonight, I still don't have complete confidence in him. Do I think that Megill can build off of this next year, come back, and maybe he has the type of breakout that we've seen from David Peterson this year? I mean, that's in the cards potentially, but do I absolutely trust him in these next couple starts? Not necessarily, but he's a good option to have, and you'll have to see. This is why I think Megill is going to be part of this team from here on out, though, because the value that he can bring in a bulk relief role, if nothing else, is going to be more important than what you might get from a Brazaban or an Alex Young, because every day matters and every single game carries over to the next one. So if Paul Blackburn is going to make a start in Philly and his back tightens up after the second inning, you damn sure better have Tylor Megill on the roster to be able to pitch after him and piggyback if needed. So I think at this stage, I would not expect Megill to get sent back down. I think he's here to stay. Blackburn, we still don't know if he is eligible or not. He's eligible. If he's available to return and to pitch down the stretch, I think it'd be Brazaban or Alex Young that is sent down. So that's where we're at. We'll see what happens from here. As far as how the rotation is going to shape up for the rest of the week, it'll be David Peterson versus Chris Bassett, Tuesday night's game. That'll be Sean and I versus Bowden Francis in the Wednesday afternoon game. Beyond that, over the weekend, I'd imagine Jose Quintana starts game 1 against the Phillies, then probably Luis Severino, and then they have to make a decision on whether it's Megill, David Peterson pitching on regular rest. Megill would be an extra day's rest because the Mets have the day off on Thursday, or if it is Blackburn or some combination of multiple guys. That could be the case as well. Sean Manaea, I think will pitch on regular rest again on Monday against the Nationals because that would set him up to pitch on Saturday against the Phillies at home next week, and then set him up to pitch again Thursday on the road in Atlanta in the final game of that crucial series against the Braves. I think everything else is up in the air for this rotation. It'll be a series-by-series decision on who's going to start, other than Manaea, who I think will just stay to his regular rest from here on out. I want to talk a little bit about the bullpen, though, to close out the show, because I think roles might need to be adjusted, and particularly I'm talking about Jose Butto. The Mets can't just rely on what we've seen over long sample sizes of the season and just say, yeah, we can trust Jose Butto because he's been great out of the bullpen this season. You got to be quick on figuring out which guys are hot and which guys aren't. And since August 13th, Jose Butto has walked 11 batters and he's hit 1 compared to 10 strikeouts. He is struggling a bit with his command. He's given up earned runs in 3 of his last 6 outings. And today he gave up 2 inherited runs. So 4 of his last 6 outings really haven't gone great. So you have to acknowledge that and maybe not pitch him in high leverage spots. On the other hand, Ryan Stanek has looked dominant lately. Last 2 outings, he's been perfect. 5 strikeouts of the 6 outs that he's gotten. He hasn't walked anyone in his last 5 outings, hasn't given up a hit in his last 3. And again, 3 scoreless outings in a row, the last 2 with a ton of strikeouts tonight. Struck out the side. Looks like he has command of his fastball. And when that pitch is playing up in the zone, good luck. Hitters are going to struggle. And he has a long career of doing it and also a long career of pitching in high leverage spots on really good teams. So Ryan Stanek might all of a sudden be the guy that we were hoping he was going to be when he was the first big trade of deadline week. Phil Maton came a couple weeks prior. So maybe Stanek and Maton are all of a sudden the 7th and 8th inning guys for Edwin Diaz. Also, Reed Garrett is back to being a guy that I think you can trust. It's tough because he's had long stretches of this season where he hasn't been trustworthy, but he's now walked a batter in his last 7 outings, has 2 straight appearances where he's gotten 4 outs, so he's gotten out of a jam, gone back out for another inning, put up a 0, and in each of those outings, he struck out 3, so 4 outs, 3 of them via strikeouts. He looks dominant again, and that's going to be huge for the Mets because if they can go with Diaz, Maton, Stanek, and Garrett, that's a pretty good back end. Butto is still going to get some looks. I'm not saying he's not going to be part of this team, but he's got to figure some things out. Maybe getting some extended rest here could be good for Butto. Now, what does that mean for how you manage your bullpen? It's just a matter of maybe giving some other guys some opportunities in leverage spots that have been going to Budo because he was the trusted guy. Maybe you had to put some faith in Ryan Stanek, in Reed Garrett, in Phil Maton, in Adam Ottavino. So we'll see. I think that is the core of what this bullpen is, along with Danny Young. It's Diaz, Maton, Stanek, Garrett, Budo, Ottavino, and Young. Those 7 guys, I believe, will be there from here on out. The final pieces are going to be up in the air. For now, Alex Young, Huascar Brazaban. If Paul Blackburn can return, I think one of those guys gets optioned down and Tylor Megill stays in the bullpen. We talked a little bit about Shintaro Fujinami. Had another great outing, 2 scoreless. So he continues to dominate in AAA. If the Mets want to go to the well there, they can. They can bring him up. We'll see. But I'm starting to have some faith in this bullpen. And they just got to keep it together for 3 more weeks to get into October and hopefully beyond that, of course. But it's 18 more games. This bullpen can really lock in. That's going to be huge because this lineup is suddenly slumping and the Mets are having to win these close games, and they're doing it. So you got to keep that up. Hopefully the bats will break out in this series and make it a little bit easier on that bullpen. But if you got to win games by a score of 2-1 or 3-2 or 1-0, you got to do what you can. If you get a lead, that bullpen's got to hold on to it. And I do think they finally have the arms to get the job done, but they have to be very vigilant. When a guy starts to struggle, you can't just be hard-headed and keep Jose Budo in an 8th inning role if he's the guy that's been struggling the most out of this bullpen. Over the last couple of weeks, it really has been Budo that has been the worst guy, honestly. If you look at the stats, Budo's been the guy that has had the innings where he's walking guys, he's getting himself into trouble, he's not cleaning up other people's messes. Other pitchers like Stanek, Ottavino, Garrett have been lights out. Now, they've been pitching in lower leverage situations, but you might have to trust them again. And the good thing, particularly with Stanek and Ottavino, and as well as Phil Maton, these are guys that have a long career of big league experience to lean on in those spots. So they're not going to get phased by a pennant race. They've been in those before, they've delivered, and hopefully that veteran experience comes up big here as the Mets try to close out this playoff spot. 18 games left. 1 game up on the Braves after they lost today. Hopefully we'll see more of that this week, and the Mets can start to build a little bit of a cushion. But for now, it's day to day, and it's a thrilling ride. So I encourage you all to be here with me every single day down the stretch. If you're listening on the audio side, follow, rate, review wherever you get your podcast. If you're watching on YouTube, hit that subscribe button. Again, our goal is to get to 10,000 subscribers by the end of the season, so I appreciate all of you who subscribe. If you want to be a Locked On Mets insider, find the link in the episode description. Go to subtext.com/LockedOnMets. You can follow me on X, Finkelstein Ryan. Follow the show at Locked On Mets. Thank you for making Locked On Mets your first listen or your first watch every day. Now, for your second watch, head over to YouTube and check out the first ever 24/7 streaming channel that covers everything, the world of sports. Talking about Locked On Sports Today with our local hosts from each team, league-wide hosts from each league. Find Locked On Sports Today streaming 24/7 on YouTube.